For decades, the message never changed. No variation. No added detail. Just a quiet signal, repeating on every known frequency. Do not enter that region. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a claim. It wasn't even a warning in the way most species understood warnings. There was no consequence attached. No demonstration of force. No explanation. Just restraint. Humanity didn't expand into that region. Didn't mine it. Didn't study it. Didn't even observe it closely. They marked it. And stayed away. At first, the galaxy found it curious. Then, irrelevant. Because space was vast. Endless. Full of opportunity. One restricted region meant nothing. Not when there were entire sectors left unexplored. Untouched. Unclaimed. But over time, patterns emerged. Explorers plotted routes. Merchants mapped trade corridors. Empires expanded borders. And every single time, that region remained empty. Not avoided out of fear, but out of discomfort. Navigation systems reported anomalies. Nothing consistent. Nothing dangerous enough to justify avoidance. Just wrong. Signals that didn't behave correctly. Coordinates that drifted slightly when rechecked. Stars that appeared dimmer or brighter, depending on when they were observed. It wasn't enough to alarm anyone, but it was enough to make them hesitate. So most simply, went around. Not because of humanity's warning, but because nothing valuable seemed to be there anyway. No habitable worlds. No resource-rich systems. No strategic advantage. Just empty space. That didn't feel quite right. And so, for a long time, the message remained what it had always been. Ignored. Until someone decided to test it. The Ketheri Dominion didn't believe in empty space. Every region had value. Every anomaly had purpose. Every warning was a challenge. They had built their empire on that belief. Expanding where others hesitated. Claiming what others ignored. Turning unknowns into power. So when their long-range probes flagged the restricted region, they didn't see danger. They saw opportunity. A sector untouched by competition. Unclaimed. Uncontested. Perfect. The human signal was noted. Logged. Dismissed. Because it lacked one critical element. Proof. There was no demonstration of threat. No evidence of hazard. No history of loss. Just a message. And to the Dominion, messages without force meant nothing. They sent a scouting fleet first. Standard procedure. Light vessels. Advanced sensors. Autonomous support systems. Designed to map, analyze, and report. The fleet approached the boundary. Everything appeared normal. No energy signatures. No spatial distortions. No visible obstacles. Just space. Quiet. Empty. The lead vessel crossed the line. Nothing happened. No alarms. No system disruptions. No change. The rest followed. Formation held. Sensors active. Data streaming back to Dominion Command. Initial reports confirmed expectations. The region was stable. Barren. Unremarkable. Exactly as predicted. The human warning seemed unnecessary. Incorrect. Possibly even deceptive. The Dominion advanced further. Deeper into the region. Expanding sensor range. Mapping star positions. Recording gravitational fields. And that's when the first anomaly appeared. Subtle. Almost insignificant. A slight delay in signal transmission. Milliseconds. Then slightly more. Systems recalibrated. Compensated. The fleet continued. Then came the second anomaly. Star positions shifted. Not dramatically. Not enough to trigger alarms. But enough to be noticed. Charts updated. Coordinates adjusted. Still within acceptable variance. Still explainable. The Dominion pressed forward. Confidence intact. Because nothing had happened. Nothing meaningful. Nothing dangerous. Just minor inconsistencies. The kind space always produced. Then the third anomaly occurred. And this time, it couldn't be ignored. One of the outer vessels reported visual contact with another fleet. Unknown origin. Unknown signature. Positioned just beyond sensor range. Command requested confirmation. Additional scans returned. Nothing. No fleet. No ships. No energy readings. The contact was dismissed as sensor error. The vessel recalibrated. The fleet moved on. But the reports continued. Different ships. Different positions. Same result. Visual confirmation. Without sensor validation. Something was there. But also, not there. That was when the Dominion finally slowed. Not stopped. Not retreated. But cautious. Because uncertainty was something they respected. Even if they didn't fear it. They deployed deeper scans. Higher resolution mapping. Gravitational analysis. And what came back didn't make sense. Space wasn't behaving correctly. Distances fluctuated. Signal paths bent. Slightly. Time delays increased. Without cause. It wasn't enough to prove danger. But it was enough to raise questions. And still, they continued. Because turning back would mean admitting the warning had meaning. And that was something the Dominion refused to accept. The fleet advanced to the region's core. And then, everything stopped. No explosion. No distress signal. No final transmission. Just silence. Instant. Complete. Every ship. Every system. Gone. As if they had never been there. The command network waited. 4 seconds. Minutes. Then longer. Emergency protocols activated. Signal pings sent. No response. No debris. No wreckage. No trace. The entire fleet had vanished. Without a single piece of evidence left behind. At first, they assumed failure. Catastrophic system collapse. Chain reaction. Unlikely, but possible. Then they checked the last recorded data. And realized something far worse. The fleet hadn't been destroyed. It hadn't been attacked. It hadn't even had time to react. Because whatever happened, had happened everywhere. All at once. No progression. No sequence. Just removal. The Dominion attempted to recover logs. Fragments. Anything. But the data ended abruptly. Mid-transmission. Mid-scan. Mid-thought. As if reality itself had simply decided they no longer existed. The report spread quickly. Across empires. Across trade networks. Across every system that had once ignored the human message. Because now, it wasn't just a warning anymore. It was evidence. And for the first time, species began to reconsider. Not out of fear, but out of something far more dangerous. Understanding. Because humanity had never enforced the boundary. Never defended it. Never explained it. They had only said, do not enter that region. And now, everyone knew why. But the most unsettling part wasn't the disappearance. It wasn't the silence. It wasn't even the complete lack of evidence. It was something far simpler. Something far harder to ignore. Humanity had known. All along. And they hadn't tried to stop anyone. They had only warned them. Once. Quietly. And then waited. For someone. To ignore it. At first, the message was just background noise. A quiet signal repeating across comm networks. Slipping between trade transmissions and navigation updates. Do not enter that region. No urgency. No authority. No consequence. To most of the galaxy, it barely registered. Because humanity, in the grand scale of things, was still new. A young species. Recently emerged. Still defining its place among powers that had existed for millennia. They had no history of dominance. No record of large-scale conquest. No reputation that justified claiming entire regions of space. So when they spoke, most didn't listen. Or worse, they laughed. In trade hubs and diplomatic forums, the message became a curiosity. A topic for idle discussion. A minor joke. Humans claiming territory now. They haven't even finished mapping their own borders. Empty space, no less. Because that was the strangest part. If the region had value, resources, habitable systems, strategic advantage, then a claim might have made sense. But it didn't. It was empty. Or at least, it appeared that way. No major star systems. No significant energy signatures. No reason for anyone to want it. Which made the warning feel performative. As if humanity was trying to appear more powerful than it actually was. Drawing a line where no one else cared to look. And yet, they never expanded into it. Never explored it openly. Never sent research fleets. Never built stations along its edge. They simply marked it. And stayed away. That detail didn't go unnoticed. But it wasn't enough to change opinions. Because if humanity truly controlled that region, why not use it? Why not claim resources? Why not demonstrate its importance? Instead, they did nothing. Except repeat the same message. Over and over again. Do not enter that region. Trade networks adjusted routes slightly. But not out of respect. Out of convenience. Why pass through empty space when there were better paths? Explorers noted the boundary, but treated it as optional. A suggestion, not a rule. Some even used it as a test. A way to prove independence. To show they weren't bound by the words of a younger species. They crossed the edge. Briefly. Collected data. Then returned. And when nothing happened, their confidence grew. Reports circulated. The region is stable. No hostile presence detected. Human warning appears unfounded. Each successful entry weakened the message. Turned it from caution into myth. And myths didn't hold power for long. Soon, small-scale routes began to form. Nothing official. Nothing heavily trafficked. But enough. Enough for movement. Enough for presence. Enough to show that the boundary meant nothing. Still, humanity didn't react. No patrols. No enforcement. No attempts to block access. No escalation. Just the same signal. Unchanged. Unmoved. Unanswered. Do not enter that region. That silence became its own kind of statement. To some, it meant humanity lacked the ability to enforce their claim. To others, it meant they didn't care enough to try. Either way, the conclusion was the same. The warning wasn't real. It couldn't be. Because real threats came with action. With proof. With consequence. And humanity offered none of those. Only words. Quiet. Consistent. Easy to ignore. Until the Ketheri Dominion vanished. Not damaged. Not defeated. Gone. Without trace. Without explanation. Without even a final signal to analyze. That changed things. Not immediately. But slowly. Because now, there was a gap. A contradiction. All the reports that had dismissed the region. All the data that had labeled it safe. Now stood against a single fact. An entire fleet had ceased to exist. And the only common factor was location. Inside the boundary. The same boundary humanity had marked. The same one they had never enforced. The same one they had only warned about. Quietly. Repeatedly. Without ever explaining why. Trade routes shifted again. This time, not out of convenience. Out of uncertainty. Explorers paused. Rechecked data. Reviewed past logs. Looked for anything they had missed. Anything that could explain what happened. But there was nothing. No pattern. No anomaly large enough to justify total disappearance. Just absence. And that was the problem. Because absence couldn't be studied. Couldn't be predicted. Couldn't be controlled. The message returned to the forefront. No longer background noise. No longer a joke. Now, it was something else. Something heavier. Something harder to dismiss. Because it had always been there. Unchanged. Unforced. Unexplained. Do not enter that region. And now, for the first time, the galaxy began to ask a different question. Not why humanity claimed it, but how they knew. They didn't send a probe. They didn't send scouts. They sent a fleet. Because by then, Curiosity had turned into defiance. The Ketheri Dominion was gone, and that should have been enough. But for some, it wasn't proof. It was a challenge. The Varelian Combine didn't believe in mysteries. Only undiscovered mechanics. Unknown variables waiting to be understood. And understood meant controlled. So they prepared. Not cautiously, not quietly, but deliberately. A full expeditionary fleet. Warships, carriers, sensor arrays, redundant communication relays. Everything required to ensure one thing. Nothing unexpected would go unrecorded. They didn't intend to conquer. Not yet. They intended to observe. To push into the restricted region. And prove that whatever had happened before could be explained, replicated, neutralized. The galaxy watched. Not openly, not officially, but through back channels, private networks, shared data links. Everyone wanted to know, was the human warning real, or just coincidence? The fleet approached the boundary. Formation tight, systems synchronized, every ship linked, every sensor active, recording everything. If something happened, they would see it, understand it, survive it. The lead vessel crossed first. A calculated decision. Minimize risk. Test response. Nothing happened. No alarms. No fluctuations. No visible change. The second ship followed. Then the third. Then the rest. One by one, they entered the region. Everything remained stable. Sensors reported normal conditions. Gravitational fields consistent. Star positions unchanged. Communications clear. The command network relaxed. Slightly. Not fully. But enough. Because once again, the warning appeared meaningless. The fleet advanced. Deeper. Further than any confirmed entry before. Data streamed continuously. Mapped. Logged. Shared across the network. Everything looked ordinary. Empty space. Quiet. Still. And then, it stopped. Not gradually. Not in sequence. All at once. Every signal. Every feed. Every transmission. Gone. The network didn't register a failure. It registered absence. Like a voice mid-sentence. Cut off. Not fading. Not breaking. Just ending. Across dozens of monitoring stations. The same result. Screens filled with static. Data streams froze. Coordinates remained. But nothing else. No distress call. No warning. No sign of attack. No evidence of malfunction. Just silence. Absolute. Total. The fleet had vanished. The command systems attempted reconnect ion. Emergency pings. Priority signals. Automated recall commands. Nothing returned. No echo. No delay. No response. It was as if the fleet had never existed. Except it had. Moments ago. Tracked. Observed. Alive. And now. Nothing. The galaxy didn't react immediately. Because there was nothing to react to. No explosion to analyze. No wreckage to recover. No enemy to identify. Just a gap. A missing piece. A fleet-sized absence in space. But slowly, quietly, that absence began to matter. Because it happened the same way as before. The Ketheri Dominion. Gone. Now the Varelian Combine. Gone. Different fleets. Different technologies. Different approaches. Same result. The only constant was the location. Inside the boundary. Inside the region humanity had marked. The message returned. Not louder. Not stronger. Exactly the same. Do not enter that region. No added detail. No acknowledgement of what had happened. No claim of responsibility. Just the same words. Unchanged. And that made it worse. Because now, it didn't sound like arrogance. It didn't sound like a bluff. It sounded like something else entirely. Something far more unsettling. Certainty. The galaxy began to pay attention. Not out of fear. Not yet. But out of necessity. Because two fleets. fully equipped, fully prepared, had crossed a line, and ceased to exist. Without explanation, without resistance, without even leaving behind a single piece of evidence. And humanity had known it would happen, long before anyone else. They hadn't tried to stop it, hadn't tried to prove it, hadn't tried to convince anyone. They had only said, "Do not enter that region." And now, those words carried weight, because they were no longer a warning. They were the only thing left. After everything else was gone, they expected arrogance. That was the pattern. When a species proved itself right, especially in something this absolute, there was always a reaction. A claim, a warning reinforced with force, or at the very least, acknowledgement. But humanity did none of those. When the reports reached Earth, first the Dominion, then the Combine, then the confirmed absence of both. There was no broadcast, no statement, no "we told you so." Just silence. Not the same silence as the vanished fleets. This one was different. Deliberate, controlled, heavy. Across diplomatic channels, inquiries flooded in. What happened in that region? Is this your doing? Explain the anomaly. Confirm threat classification. Questions layered over questions. Urgent, demanding, increasing in tone. Humanity responded. Once. A single transmission. Short. Unchanged from before. Do not enter that region. Nothing more. No expansion. No clarification. No reassurance. And then, they went quiet again. That was when unease began to spread. Because confidence looked different. Confidence celebrated. Dominance announced itself. Power made noise. But this felt like something else. Concern. Not fear. Not panic. But something close enough that older civilizations recognized it instantly. The kind of silence that comes when something known is about to become a problem. Behind closed networks, far from public channels, human systems changed. Subtly, quietly, but unmistakably. Long-dormant protocols activated. Authorization chains opened. Ones that hadn't been used in generations. Secure facilities unlocked. Locations that didn't exist on any shared map suddenly came online. Deep space stations powered up. Hidden arrays aligned. Buried systems, forgotten by everyone except those who built them, began to respond. Not chaotically, not urgently, precisely, like a sequence that had been waiting. Prepared. Rehearsed. Just never needed. Until now. Internal communications were restricted. Segmented. Even allied observers lost visibility. For the first time since joining the wider galaxy, humanity closed itself off. Not completely, but enough. Enough to make it clear. Something was happening. Something not meant to be seen. Not yet. In orbital space around Earth, traffic shifted. Civilian lanes rerouted. Military presence increased. Not aggressively, but deliberately. Positions adjusted. Coverage expanded. Gaps closed. No outward hostility, but no vulnerability either. And still, no explanation. That was what unsettled everyone the most. Because if this had been a weapon, humanity would have used it. If it had been a trap, they would have claimed it. If it had been an accident, they would have warned about it in detail. But they did none of those things. They only repeated the same words. As if they weren't enough. And as if they were already too late. Observers began reviewing old records. Looking for clues. Anything humanity might have missed. But the message had always been the same. Unchanged. Unexpanded. Which meant one thing. They had known. Not just that something was there, but that it didn't need explanation. Because explanation wouldn't help. Wouldn't prevent it. Wouldn't change the outcome. That realization spread slowly. Quietly. Across systems that had once dismissed the warning. And as it did, a new question replaced the old ones. Not what is in that region. Not how did the fleets disappear. but something far more unsettling. What is humanity preparing for? Because whatever it wasn't new. It wasn't unexpected. And it wasn't something they were discovering alongside everyone else. They were responding to it. Like they had been waiting. For the moment someone finally crossed the line. Far enough. Deep enough. To wake something that should have been left alone. And now, whatever had taken 2 entire fleets, was no longer just a warning. It was active. And humanity was getting ready. The answer wasn't found in space. It wasn't hidden in the vanished fleets. It wasn't buried in sensor data or broken transmissions. It was older than all of that. And it had been sitting in human archives. Unshared. For longer than anyone realized. The breakthrough didn't come from human disclosure. It came from fragments. Leaked records. Recovered files from early human expansion. Data that was never meant to leave their systems. But now had. Because too many questions were being asked. And someone, somewhere, decided the galaxy needed to see. At first, the files seemed incomplete. Corrupted. Inconsistent. Dates didn't align with known timelines. Locations didn't match mapped sectors. It looked like bad data. Until analysts began cross-referencing. Matching fragments. Reconstructing sequences. And slowly, the picture formed. It started before humanity joined the galactic stage. Before first contact. Before diplomacy. Before anyone knew they existed. Back when they were still expanding quietly. Testing the edges of their own system. Pushing outward. Cautiously. Curiously. The region. The one now marked and feared. Hadn't always been restricted. It had been explored. Surveyed. Entered. Just like any other sector. At first, there was nothing unusual. Standard readings. Stable space. No anomalies large enough to trigger concern. So they went deeper. Sent more probes. Then ships. Then long-range missions. The logs showed excitement. Discovery. The same curiosity every species felt when stepping into the unknown. Until the first inconsistency appeared. A signal. Faint. Repeating. Not human. Not artificial in any recognizable way. But structured. Patterned. Deliberate. They tried to decode it. Failed. Tried to trace its source. Failed. It didn't come from a point. It came from everywhere. The entire region. Broadcasting something. Without origin. That should have been the first warning. It wasn't. Because curiosity overrode caution. They moved closer. Deeper. And that's when things began to change. Distances became unreliable. Navigation systems drifted. Timestamps desynchronized. Nothing dramatic. Nothing catastrophic. Just wrong. Subtle. Persistent. Enough to notice. Not enough to stop. Until the first ship disappeared. Not lost. Not damaged. Gone. Mid-transmission. No distress call. No system failure. Just absence. They assumed error. Sent another. Same result. Then another. And another. Each one vanishing. The same way. No pattern. No cause. No trace. That's when the tone of the logs changed. Curiosity faded. Replaced by caution. Then concern. Then something else. Something the early records didn't describe directly, but implied. Fear. Humanity pulled back. Not completely. Not yet. They needed answers. Needed to understand what they were dealing with. So they changed approach. Remote observation. Long-range scans. No direct entry. And that's when they saw it. Not clearly. Not fully. But enough. Something moved in that region. Not like ships. Not like natural phenomena. It didn't follow trajectories. Didn't obey physics in any consistent way. It wasn't bound by space. The way everything else was. And when it interacted with matter, matter stopped existing. Not destroyed. Not broken apart. Removed. As if it had never been there. That was when the logs stopped calling it an anomaly. And started calling it something else. An event. Because it wasn't a thing you could target, or fight, or escape from once it noticed you. It was something that happened. To you. Humanity tried. They always did. They sent weapons. Nothing worked. Energy dissipated. Matter disappeared before impact. They tried to isolate it. Contain it. Trap it. Nothing held. Because it wasn't contained by boundaries. Not physical ones. Not in any way they understood. And that was the moment everything changed. Because the conclusion became unavoidable. This couldn't be destroyed. Couldn't be fought. Couldn't be reasoned with. Only one option remained. Limit it. Restrict it. Keep it from spreading. From interacting with the rest of the galaxy. So they did something no species had ever attempted before. They didn't build a weapon. They built a boundary. Not a physical barrier. Not a wall. But a region. A controlled zone. Mapped. Monitored. Defined. Everything inside it. Left alone. Everything outside it. Protected. They withdrew. Completely. No more missions. No more probes. No more attempts to understand. Because understanding wasn't worth the cost. They sealed it. The only way they could. By isolation. By absence. By ensuring nothing went in. So nothing could come out. And then. They waited. Watched. For years. Decades. Generations. And the region remained stable. Silent. Unchanged. As long as nothing entered it. That was the key. The only rule. The only condition that mattered. Do not go in. That was the warning. Not ownership. Not control. Not power. Survival. Because the moment something crossed that boundary, it didn't just risk itself. It risked interaction. Attention. Activation. And now, 2 entire fleets had gone deep enough. Long enough. To trigger exactly what humanity had spent generations preventing. The leaks spread across the galaxy. Quietly at first. Then faster. Because once the pieces were seen together, they couldn't be ignored. The warning had never been arrogance. It had never been a bluff. It had never been about territory. It had been about containment. And now, containment had failed. Not because humanity made a mistake, but because someone else did. Someone who thought empty space was harmless. And as that realization settled, a single thought followed it. If humanity, after everything they tried, could only seal it, then what exactly had just been let loose? At first, it didn't look like anything at all. No explosion. No surge of energy. No signal announcing its arrival. Just a ripple. So small. Most systems ignored it. A slight fluctuation in background readings. A deviation in long-range sensor data. Barely measurable. Easily dismissed. Until it happened again. And again. Spreading outward. Not fast. Not slow. Just inevitable. Like something moving. Without needing to move. The first confirmed event came from a border system. Routine traffic. Civilian vessels. Nothing military. Nothing significant. A transport ship reported a navigation error. Coordinates drifting. Systems recalibrating automatically. Then, mid-transmission, it vanished. Not destroyed. Not disrupted. Gone. The signal cut instantly. No debris. No energy spike. No trace. At first, it was logged as a malfunction. Until the second ship disappeared. Then the third. All within the same sector. All without warning. That's when long-range sensors picked up something else. A distortion. Not in space, but in consistency. Distances didn't align. Signal delays fluctuated. Light itself shifted. Stars at the edge of the system appeared dimmer. Not fading naturally. Not obstructed. Just reduced. As if something was taking from them. The data was sent outward. Shared. Compared. And the pattern became undeniable. The ripple had crossed the boundary. It wasn't contained anymore. Nearby systems began reporting similar anomalies. Minor at first. Then escalating. Ships losing synchronization. Navigation errors increasing. Sensors returning conflicting data. And then, the disappearances. Not isolated. Not rare. Consistent. Predictable only in one way. They couldn't be predicted. Military fleets were deployed. Positioned at the edge of affected systems. Weapons ready. Scanning for targets. For something to fight. But there was nothing. No ships. No energy signatures. No identifiable threat. Just space. Behaving incorrectly. And then, it reached them. A patrol vessel recorded the moment. One of the few transmissions that made it back. The crew reported visual distortion. Stars stretching. Light bending. In ways that didn't follow gravitational laws. Timestamps desynchronized. Internal systems lagging. Then accelerating. Voices overlapping. Out of sequence. And then, silence. The recording ended. Mid-sentence. Just like the others. More systems fell. Not destroyed. Not attacked. Removed. Sections of space where ships had been. Now empty. Routes that once existed. No longer valid. Coordinates that pointed to nothing. The ripple continued outward. Expanding. Touching system after system. Each one losing something. A ship. A station. A star. The first star went unnoticed. Because stars don't vanish quickly. Not normally. But the data showed it clearly. Luminosity dropping. Mass readings inconsistent. Energy output declining. Without cause. Then, it wasn't there anymore. No collapse. No supernova. No remnants. Just absence. That was when panic finally began. Not contained. Not controlled. Because this wasn't war. There was no enemy to engage. No strategy to deploy. No defense to raise. You couldn't fight something. That didn't interact with you. In any way you understood. You couldn't protect against something. That didn't follow rules. The ripple spread further. Faster now. Or maybe, it had always been this fast. And they were only just realizing it. Messages flooded toward Earth. Urgent. Desperate. What is happening? How do we stop it? Tell us how to contain it. This time, humanity responded. Not with the same quiet warning. Not with silence. But with something far worse. A delay. Long enough. For more systems to go dark. For more ships to vanish. For the reality of the situation to settle in. And then, a single transmission. Different from before. Not a warning. Not a suggestion. A statement. It's out. Nothing more. No instructions. No reassurance. Just confirmation. The thing they had sealed, contained, isolated for generations, was no longer confined. And everything that followed, everything happening now, was exactly what they had tried to prevent. Across the galaxy, understanding finally arrived. Too late. The region hadn't been dangerous. It had been contained danger. A boundary, not to keep others out, but to keep something in. And now, that boundary didn't matter anymore, because whatever had been inside was moving, not like ships, not like storms, but like an event, a condition, a change in reality itself. And it wasn't stopping, because nothing had ever stopped it before, only contained it. And now, that containment was gone. The seal had been broken. Panic didn't arrive all at once. It spread, system by system, message by message. At first, it was controlled. Requests for clarification, polite inquiries, carefully worded transmissions asking Earth for further insight. But as more ships vanished, as more stars dimmed, as navigation itself began to fail, the tone changed. Fast. Formal language collapsed into urgency. Urgency into desperation. Because for the first time in recorded galactic history, there was no countermeasure. No weapon. No defense. No strategy. Every civilization had faced extinction scenarios before. Wars. Supernovae. Rogue phenomena. Even those could be studied, predicted, avoided. But this wasn't something you could outrun. Because it didn't move like anything known. It didn't travel. It expanded. And that meant one thing. Every system, every world, every species, was already inside its reach. They just didn't know when it would arrive. That realization broke the last layer of control. Emergency channels flooded toward Earth. Not just from minor powers, but from empires, coalitions, species that had never asked anyone for anything. Now asking, demanding, begging, what is it? How do we stop it? Tell us how to survive. Give us a way to fight back. Even the Varelian remnants, what little command structure remained, sent a signal. Fragmented, unstable, but clear enough. We will offer anything. That was the shift. Because power, in the galaxy, had always been measured in control, in certainty, in dominance. And now, those same voices were asking for help from the one species they had ignored, mocked, dismissed. All the messages converged on Earth. Priority overrides, diplomatic bypasses, emergency access codes, everything they had, thrown at a single destination. And for a moment, there was nothing, no response, no acknowledgement, just the same silence that had unsettled them before. Only now, it meant something different. It meant time was running out. Because while they waited, more systems went dark, more signals vanished, more of reality simply stopped being there. Then, finally, Earth responded. The transmission was global, not targeted, not selective. Every system, every receiver, every surviving network got the same message. No delay, no distortion, perfect clarity, and only one line. We told you to stay away. That was it. No instructions, no explanation, no plan, just the same truth. Spoken too late. The reaction was immediate. Confusion, anger, disbelief. That's it. That's your answer. You knew this would happen. Accusations followed. Why didn't you stop us? Why didn't you explain? Why didn't you force the boundary? Why didn't you do more? But even as those messages were sent, they already knew the answer. Because humanity had done exactly one thing. From the very beginning, they had warned them, clearly, consistently, without deception, without hidden meaning. Do not enter that region. And every civilization, every empire, every fleet that had crossed that line, had made the same choice. To ignore it, to test it, to prove it wrong. And now, they were asking for a solution to a problem they had created. The requests kept coming. More desperate, more urgent, less controlled. Entire systems offering alliances, technology, resources, anything, for an answer, for a way out, for something. But Earth didn't respond again. Not immediately. Because there was nothing simple left to say. No easy fix. No hidden weapon to deploy. Only a reality that had been contained once, at great cost, and was now free. The galaxy had turned to humanity. Not because they were the strongest. Not because they were the most advanced. But because they were the only ones who had seen this before, who had faced it, who had survived it, and who had made a choice that everyone else had undone. And now, as systems continued to disappear, as space itself became unreliable, as the ripples spread further, one truth settled in. Heavier than fear, heavier than panic. Humanity hadn't been guarding a territory. They had been holding the line, alone, for generations. And when they told the galaxy to stay away, it hadn't been a warning of power. It had been a warning of consequence. One that no one had taken seriously, until it was far too late. The first signs weren't loud. No grand announcements. No rallying cries. Just movement. Quiet at first. Then, everywhere. Hidden coordinates lit up across human space. Locations that had never appeared on trade maps. Stations that didn't officially exist. Deep space facilities long assumed abandoned. Coming back online. Power surged through systems that hadn't activated in generations. Dockyards unfolded. Massive structures shifted, revealing shapes the galaxy had never seen before. Not warships. Not in any recognizable sense. Because these vessels didn't look built for combat. They weren't streamlined. They weren't fast. They weren't elegant. They were heavy, lead, reinforced beyond necessity, as if they were designed to endure something, not fight it. And that was the first clue. Human fleets began to assemble, not in formation, not in battle groups, but in patterns, geometric, calculated, positions chosen with extreme precision. Each ship aligning with invisible coordinates, forming structures across space itself. Observers tried to map it. Failed. Because the pattern didn't exist on a flat plane. It stretched across depth, distance, something more. Like they were building something you couldn't fully see. Messages flooded in again. What are those ships? What are you deploying? Is this a counterattack? Earth responded. Not publicly this time, but through controlled channels. To those who needed to understand. These are not fleets. Pause. Then. They are anchors. That word spread quickly. Anchors. Not weapons. Not defenses. Something else entirely. Something meant to hold. To stabilize. To resist. The scale became clearer as more vessels emerged. Some the size of cities. Others, larger. Massive constructs built around cores that pulsed with energy unlike anything recorded. Not weapon signatures. Not propulsion. Something deeper. Something fundamental. Humanity had been building these. For a long time. Not recently. Not in response to the current crisis. Long before it. Hidden. Waiting. For this exact moment. That realization spread faster than panic. Because it meant one thing. This wasn't unexpected. This wasn't a surprise. Humanity had always known. This could happen again. And they had prepared accordingly. The fleets moved outward. Not toward the center of the phenomenon. But around it. Positioning along the expanding edge. Where systems were still intact. Where space still behaved normally. For now. Each vessel reached its assigned point. And stopped. No engagement. No weapons deployed. Just presence. And then they activated. At first, nothing visible. Then subtle changes. Sensor readings stabilized. Distortions slowed. Signal delays corrected. Not reversed, but resisted. Like something pushing back against the spread. The ripple hit the first line of vessels. Observers watched, expecting disappearance. Loss. Failure. But the ships held. Not untouched. But not erased. Energy fluctuations spiked. Structural stress readings climbed. Systems strained. Beyond safe limits. And still. They remained. Because they weren't trying to destroy what was coming. They were trying to contain it. To hold the line. Again. Just like before. Only this time. It wasn't confined to a single region. It was already out. Already spreading. And that made everything harder. More dangerous. More uncertain. Because containment now meant rebuilding a boundary. In motion. Across space that was actively breaking. Across systems that were already failing. Human commanders issued directives. Precise. Measured. No panic. No hesitation. Because every step had been planned. Every sequence. Rehearsed. Even if no one else knew it existed. Additional vessels joined the formation. Expanding the perimeter. Reinforcing weak points. Adjusting positions in real time. Based on how the phenomenon reacted. It wasn't static. It wasn't predictable. But it could be influenced. Slowed. Redirected. Contained. Partially. That was enough. For now. Across the galaxy. Watching civilizations realized something chilling. This wasn't a war effort. There were no enemies to defeat. No victory conditions. No final strike that would end it. This was something else. Maintenance. Control. Damage limitation. Because the goal wasn't to win. It was to survive what couldn't be stopped. The scale of it became impossible to ignore. Hundreds of vessels. Then thousands. Each one taking position. Each one holding against something. That erased everything else it touched. And slowly, the spread began to change. Not stopping, but bending. Shifting direction. Avoiding certain regions. Concentrating in others. Like a current meeting resistance. Like something being guided, without fully understanding why. Humanity wasn't fighting it. They were shaping its path. Buying time. Preserving what they could. Sacrificing what they couldn't. And that was the part no one said out loud. Because it was obvious. Every adjustment, every redirection, meant something else was lost. Somewhere else. A system. A fleet. A star. Chosen. Calculated. Accepted. Because containment required trade-offs. And humanity had already decided what those would be. The galaxy watched. Silent now. No more demands. No more accusations. Because the truth had settled in. There was no solution being deployed. No miracle weapon. No last-minute salvation. Just a plan. Built long ago. For a scenario everyone else had refused to believe. Humanity wasn't preparing for victory. They were preparing for survival. And for the first time, the galaxy understood what that really meant. Not saving everything. Not stopping the threat. But enduring it. Long enough to rebuild the line. And hope that this time it would hold. At first, they called it loss. A system lost. Then another. Then more. Clean. Silent. Total. But loss implied something remained. Wreckage. Radiation. Aftermath. There was none. Entire systems. Gone. Not destroyed. Not shattered. Removed. Stars that had burned for billions of years. No longer there. Planets. Gone mid-orbit. Fleets. Erased between one transmission and the next. And where they had been. Nothing. Not even darkness. Just absence. A void that didn't behave like space. Didn't reflect light. Didn't register distance. Didn't exist. In any way that could be measured. That was when the galaxy stopped calling it an event. And started calling it something else. Consumption. Because it wasn't random. It wasn't chaotic. It was directional. Intentional. In a way that couldn't be understood. It moved. Not through space. But across it. Expanding its reach. Touching. Removing. Continuing. And nothing slowed it. Nothing. Except one thing. Humanity. The first engagement was recorded from the outer containment line. A cluster of human vessels. Anchored in formation. Holding position. Waiting. They didn't fire. Didn't maneuver. Didn't attempt to escape. Because they weren't there to fight. They were there to hold. The ripple reached them. And for a moment, everything distorted. Ship stretched. Light bent. Signals fractured. Any other fleet would have vanished. These didn't. They shook. Strained. Some systems failed instantly. Sections of hull simply ceased to exist. But the formation held. Barely. Long enough to do what they were built for. To resist. To anchor reality against something that erased it. The first ship went dark. Not destroyed. Just gone. Then another. Then more. One by one. They disappeared. Not retreating. Not breaking formation. Holding position. Until they no longer could. And behind them. Space stabilized. Not completely. Not permanently. But enough. Enough to slow it. Enough to change its path. Enough to buy time. That was the pattern. Again. And again. Human fleets intercepting the expanding edge. Absorbing the impact. Failing. And in failing. Slowing what followed. Each engagement cost ships. Hundreds. then thousands. Crews included. No evacuation. No recovery. Because there was no time. And no way back. Once the ripple reached them, they were already gone. They just didn't disappear immediately. That delay, that resistance, was the only reason anything else survived. Observers watched the data, tried to understand it, tried to quantify what humanity was doing. But the numbers didn't make sense. Loss rates, unsustainable. Engagement outcomes, unwinnable. No victories, only delays, only sacrifices. And yet, the line held. Not perfectly, not everywhere, but enough to slow the spread, to redirect it, to keep it from consuming everything at once. That was when the truth finally became unavoidable. This wasn't a war. Wars had sides. Wars had strategies. Wars had outcomes. This had none. There was no defeating it, no pushing it back, no ending it, only managing it, containing it, surviving it. And humanity had known that from the beginning. That was why they hadn't explained, why they hadn't demonstrated, why they hadn't enforced the boundary, because none of that would have mattered. The only thing that mattered was staying away, not triggering it, not interacting with it, not giving it reason to expand. And now, that line had been crossed. Twice. Deep enough, long enough, to wake something that couldn't be put back to sleep. Across the galaxy, systems still untouched, still stable, began to understand, not just the danger, but the scale of the mistake. Entire civilizations, with fleets, with weapons, with power, stood helpless, because none of it applied, none of it worked, and the only force making any difference, the only thing slowing the inevitable, was humanity. Alone, paying a price they had already calculated long ago, because they had seen this before, faced it, survived it, and chosen to carry the burden of keeping it contained, until someone else decided the warning didn't matter. Now, as more ships vanished, as more systems disappeared, as the edge of existence itself continued to move, the galaxy realized something far worse than fear. This had never been a fight they could win. Not together. Not with everything they had. Because this wasn't something you defeated. It was something you endured. And the only reason anyone was still alive was because one species had already learned how to pay the cost of that endurance. And was paying it again. Ship by ship. Crew by crew. System by system. Holding the line. Against something that had no reason to stop. Except them. It didn't end with a victory. There was no final battle. No moment where the galaxy turned and pushed back. No weapon. No breakthrough. No miracle. Just a line, barely holding, and a decision that had already been made long before anyone else understood the cost. Humanity began the final phase quietly. No announcement. No warning. Because by then, everyone already knew. This wasn't about saving everything. It was about saving what was left. The containment fleets shifted. Not outward. Inward. Compressing. Reforming the boundary. Not where it had been, but where it could still be held. Entire sectors were abandoned. Not evacuated. There wasn't time for that. Just let go. Coordinates removed from active navigation. Signals cut, because anything left behind would be lost anyway. The line tightened. Human vessels repositioned. Closer together now. Denser. Stronger. Every anchor locking into a new configuration. One designed not to slow, but to seal. And that was when the scale of the sacrifice became clear. Because sealing it again meant letting it take everything outside the line. No exceptions. No rescues. No second chances. Messages flooded human command. Pleading. Screaming. Demanding to be included inside the boundary. Entire civilizations. Begging for repositioning. For adjustment. For one more chance. But the line didn't move. Because it couldn't. Not without breaking entirely. not without losing everything. So humanity held position. And the ripple closed in. Faster now. Stronger. As if reacting. As if it understood. This was its last chance to expand. The first wave hit the outer anchors. They didn't hold long. They weren't meant to. They were the buffer. The delay. The cost paid. So the inner line could complete formation. Ship after ship vanished. No retreat. No deviation. Each one holding until the exact moment. Their role was fulfilled. Then gone. The inner line activated. All at once. Across distances that shouldn't have synchronized. Energy surged. Not outward, but inward. Toward the boundary. Toward the space that no longer behaved like space. Reality strained. Distorted. Stabilized. Just enough. Just long enough. The ripple pressed against the forming seal. For a moment. It pushed through. Edges breaking. Small breaches forming. Entire sections flickering. On the edge of collapse. More ships moved in. Filling the gaps. Knowing what would happen. Accepting it. Because there was no alternative. The line held. Not perfectly. Not cleanly. But enough. Slowly. The expansion stopped. Not reversed. Not destroyed. Contained. Again. The ripple pressed once more. Harder. Then. Nothing. No movement. No spread. Just. Stillness. The boundary. Reformed. Different from before. Smaller. Weaker. But intact. Inside it. Silence. The same silence that had taken fleets. Taken stars. Taken entire systems. And now. Held once more. At a cost no one could fully measure. The surviving fleets powered down. Not in triumph. But in exhaustion. Because there was nothing to celebrate. They hadn't won. They had only survived. And only part of them. Across the galaxy. What remained slowly stabilized. Navigation returned. Signals held steady. Stars burned. Where they still existed. But the map had changed. Entire regions. Gone. Not damaged. Not recoverable. Gone. And at the edge of it all. The new boundary remained. Unmarked. Unprotected. Except for one thing. The same message. Returned. Broadcast across every surviving system. Not louder. Not harsher. Just. Understood now. A final transmission from Earth followed. Clear. Calm. Unshaken. Some doors exist for a reason. A pause. Long enough for every species. Every survivor. To feel the weight of what had been lost. Then the final line. Next time. Listen. No threat. No anger. No demand. Because none of that was needed anymore. The galaxy had learned. Not through warning. Not through explanation. But through consequence. And this time. No one laughed. No one questioned. No one crossed the line. Because now. They finally understood. What humanity had known all along. Some things. Aren't meant to be explored. Not conquered. Not understood. Only contained. And if you open that door, you don't get a second chance to close it. You just hope someone else still can.